Bush 1's campaign went into existence. I had an article all written, did get published somewhere else in a very very, it wasn't internet generation, so it was published where no one would see it. Ultimately, because I had to wait while the New York Times waited a month and a half. First they accepted it, and then they dithered, and then I know someone from the State Department called them and asked them not to, that was against their policy or something. But the point of that article was to say, this is all nonsense, this Gulf War. If you're going to put all those troops into the Gulf, just go up to Baghdad. That would be easier than fighting in Kuwait. You just have to go up through the desert, which what they have seen is what you've seen, and then give the Kurds their homeland, give the Shiites their homeland. It was all what I said in this article, and let the Sunnis suffer for what they've done. They don't have any oil, and let the Kurds flourish with the oil, and let the Shiites flourish. Well, of course, the Saudi Sunni sponsors of the Bush 1 campaign in Iraq were horrified by such an idea. In any case, this is what is on the Democratic table at the moment: dismember the country. Yeah, of course, that's the only way to do it, is dismember the country. It's an artificial country, and the Turkish, the Ottoman millet system is the governing way these people operated long before the British created Iraq. Give them their autonomy or whatever. The whole thing is oil. They don't want to give the Kurds oil because they don't want the Kurds to become a revolutionary force in the Middle East, because they don't want the Kurds to deconstruct Turkey and Iran, which is what would happen because there are large Kurdish minorities in eastern Turkey and Iran. So that nobody wants to give the Kurds the oil. No one wants to give the Kurds anything. And the British, I hate to use the expression, but a better one, basically screwed the Kurds. They gave them nothing in this Iraq. And we've been watching how they've been butchered and gassed and every other thing. The Shiites in the south could have been managed in an earlier period. They would have been much more grateful back then when Saddam was, beating up on them than they are now, and now that Iran has become so aggressive. So what could have worked in 1992 doesn't necessarily work in 2006. So I don't have the answer. But I said with an intelligent foresight, understanding how the country worked, you could have done it. Go back to the millet system. So the millet system gave all the communities the power over these internal affairs. And that, you see, when the mandate came into Palestine, it conserved the Turkish administration in the way it had been previously. The Ottoman Empire had secularized civil law. I know, because I wrote a book called Islamic Law and Mandate Palestine and Modern Israel. That was my PhD thesis. So you can get it online, I'm sure. It's published by E.J. Brill. If you want to learn about how the legal system of the Middle East, not just in Palestine, but anywhere works, that's a very good book. I wrote the first third of it so I could teach myself how it worked. And maybe I should have gotten a PhD in law from it rather than what I got. But in any event, Palestine is just a case, example in point. All the countries in the Middle East are organized the same as Ottoman successor states. So ultimately, in the 30 years of the mandate, the British mandate for Palestine, which I'll talk to you about in due course, some British law was introduced. But the main source of law was still what the Ottomans had done. They adopted the French Civil Code before all this happened. For business affairs, they wanted to modernize their business structure and so on. But they left the Millets in control of personal status, and that's still the case today. And the Muslims handle Muslim affairs in Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, all these countries. And the Jews handle their own personal status, and the Jewish rabbis then have political parties. They're all Orthodox. There's a Sephardi group and an Ashkenazi group, and they won't let anything go forward. They won't let any government be formed that doesn't recognize their authority over these areas. And that's why there's no civil marriage in Israel, and there is no Reform Judaism or Conservative Judaism in Israel. Americans try to come and bring these things, and they all fall down. They all collapse before the strength. That's how strong these structures actually are. In any event, So, how do we get on that subject? What sprung that up? Yeah, but how do we get to the Millet? Aside from the rabbis controlling, we got into the rabbis controlling conservative Orthodox Judaism, conservative and Reform Judaism. So, this reaction to the Haskalah, that's how we got it. Reaction to the Haskalah, and again, Haskalah, it means Jewish enlightenment, but enlightenment that is following Enlightenment philosophers. Rousseau, Voltaire, Hobbes, Hume, Locke, and so on. This Haskalah, Mendelssohn, took place in Central Europe among primarily Ashkenazi Jews, that is, Jews from Poland, Russian Jews coming westward, Jews mostly in Germany, less in France. Now, France would be a mixture of Sephardi and Ashkenazi. Why would France be Sephardi and Ashkenazi? I explained it to you. The refugees from Spain came up into southern France in the 1600s and so on. So the earlier communities were Sephardi. England, you know, is a mixture of Sephardi and Ashkenazi. The old Jewish families in England are, guess what? Sephardi. Disraeli is not an Ashkenazi name. You wouldn't know it. But it's a Sephardi name, Disraeli. It's even Hebrew. Montefiore, all these sort of Latin-sounding names from English Jewry. Cesson, Siegfried Cesson, the famous war hero in England and so on, of the First World War. All those are Sephardi names. Well, where are the Ashkenazi? The Ashkenazi started coming in after this period we're talking about, Napoleon, the push westward of the Eastern European Jewry into Central Europe, America, and England. Now, there are more Ashkenazis in England than Sephardis, but there's still an old aristocracy in England of Sephardi Jewry who basically still have tremendous power in English Jewry and run the show, if you want to put it in those terms. And they came in, a lot of them at Cromwell's time. They were invited, as I told you, from Holland. And those Jews from Holland were not Eastern European Jews. They were Spanish Jews who had gone up to Holland because the Spanish emperor, it was Charles V, was called the Holy Roman Emperor. He had control of Holland, and there was a war fought there. If you look at some of the old paintings, I told you about it. Velázquez shows one of the battle scenes in Holland of the Spanish army against the Protestant army. It's called the Peace of Jena.